He was 16, but the way he carried himself made him seem much older. His shoulders bent slightly forward, as if he bore an invisible weight no one else could see. He rarely spoke in class, and when he did, his words came out like whispers swallowed, before they had the chance to reach anyone's ears. His grades reflected the silence that had consumed him. Teachers saw the failing marks and shook their heads. Classmates teased or ignored him, and at home, arguments about his future echoed through the walls. He often thought of himself as a shadow, moving through hallways unnoticed, blending into corners where no light reached. While others laughed at lunch tables, he found comfort in sitting alone, picking at his food, staring at the ground as if the answers to life's questions could be found in its patterns. Loneliness became his closest companion, and doubt was its relentless echo. Inside, he longed for someone to see him, not the version marked by low scores and quietness, but the boy who still dreamed quietly of writing stories, of drawing sketches in notebooks that no one else knew about. Yet, every time he thought of sharing those dreams, a voice inside him whispered that it didn't matter, that no one would care, that he was not enough. Nights were the hardest. The silence of his room pressed in on him, reminding him of his failures. His father's words about wasted potential haunted him, and his mother's tired sighs seemed to say more than her lips ever could. He would sit at his desk, pencil in hand, but the paper remained blank. It wasn't that he didn't want to try it, was that he no longer believed any effort would change who he was. Still, beneath the weight of despair, there was a fragile spark he kept hidden. Sometimes, when no one was looking, he scribbled lines of poetry on the back of old assignments, or sketched the outline of a world only he could see. They were small rebellions against the belief that he was destined to fail, quiet reminders that perhaps something in him was worth saving. But as the days blurred into weeks, even that spark began to dim. He convinced himself that shadows like him were never meant to step into the light, and so he walked on, silently, waiting for each day to pass, never knowing that one person was watching and that everything was about to change. The teacher was not extraordinary at first glance. He didn't speak with the booming authority that filled a room, nor did he demand respect through stern commands. Instead, he carried a quiet patience, the kind that seemed to listen before words were even spoken. He noticed things that others overlooked, like the way the boy kept his eyes on the floor, or how his notebook filled not with answers to equations, but with faint sketches hidden in the margins. One afternoon, after class had ended and the chatter of students faded down the hall, the teacher asked the boy to stay behind. Fear tightened in the boy's chest, expecting yet another reminder of his failures. Another voice to tell him what he'd already knew, that he was falling behind, that he was disappointing everyone, that he wasn't good enough. But instead of reprimands, the teacher simply placed a folded note on the desk. His words were few, spoken softly. He said, "Just read this when you get home." The boy nodded, though confusion filled him. He tucked the paper into his pocket, too nervous to open it under the teacher's gaze. That night, in the silence of his room, he unfolded the note with trembling hands. 4 words stared back at him, written in steady, careful handwriting. "I believe in you." He read them again, unable to comprehend why someone would write such a thing to him. His first thought was that it must have been a mistake, a generic phrase the teacher used for every struggling student. But the more he looked at those words, the more something inside him stirred. They didn't look careless. They didn't feel like a routine message. It felt personal, intentional, as though the teacher had seen something in him that no one else had bothered to notice. For the first time in years, the boy allowed himself to imagine the possibility that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't invisible. That perhaps beneath the weight of all his doubts, there was something worth believing in. The note did not erase his pain overnight. He still stumbled through tests, still felt the sting of ridicule from classmates. But in the back of his mind, those 4 words lingered like a small light in the dark. Whenever failure whispered that he was worthless, he thought of the teacher's handwriting. Whenever loneliness pressed in, he remembered that at least one person believed. That simple message was not just ink on paper. It was the first hand reaching out, the first voice breaking through the silence he had built around himself. And though he didn't know it yet, it would become the seed of his transformation. The note stayed folded in his pocket for weeks, worn at the edges from the number of times he opened it in secret. Whenever the voices of doubt grew too loud, he would run his fingers across the words and whisper them softly to himself. "I believe in you." It was as if those 4 words stitched together the pieces of his fragile hope, keeping them from breaking apart completely. The teacher did not overwhelm him with grand gestures. Instead, he offered small chances for courage to grow. He asked the boy to read a short passage aloud in class, not forcing, but gently encouraging. His voice shook, his cheeks burned, but when he finished, the teacher nodded with quiet pride. For the first time, the boy did not feel invisible. In group projects, the teacher paired him with classmates who listened instead of mocked, giving him a space where his ideas mattered. And slowly, he began to contribute, not much at first, just a thought here, a sentence there. But each word he spoke was a victory, a step out of the shadows he had been hiding in for so long. At home, the changes were subtle. His grades began to improve, little by little, as though the belief of one person had shifted something within him. Arguments with his parents softened into conversations, and while the pressure didn't disappear, there was a new determination in his eyes. Years later, long after he had left that classroom behind, the boy, now a grown man, looked back on that note as the moment his life turned. He had pursued his love for writing, a dream he once thought too foolish to share. He had built friendships, dared to stand on stages, even faced challenges that once would have broken him. And through every step, those words lived within him, like a quiet compass pointing him forward. He kept the notes safe, pressed between the pages of a worn journal. When life felt heavy again, when failures returned to test him, he returned to those 4 words and remembered that once, when he could not see his own worth, someone else had seen it for him. Sometimes, the greatest gift a teacher can give is not a lesson from a book, but a belief that outlives the classroom. His story is proof that belief, no matter how small, no matter how simple, can change the course of a life. And perhaps, listening to this, you might remember the person who once believed in you, or realize that you have the power to be that person for someone else. There are moments in life when the weight of doubt feels unbearable, when silence convinces us that we are unseen and unworthy. Yet sometimes, all it takes is one voice, one simple gesture, to remind us that we matter. The story of the teacher who wrote, "I believe in you," is not just about a student's transformation. It is about the power each of us holds to change another person's life with kindness and belief. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember to like, comment, and subscribe for more True Spirit stories.